One of these days I'm going to be late for my own funeral. It's like it was you sending client an email. That's what the nature when you're an entrepreneur and a business owner for yourself, and you kind of have to juggle multiple hats in that. But thank you all so much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be back again this year for the Big5DigitalSummit. It's always a particular event that's actually quite close to my heart and I've always been really fond of. So topic of my talk this year is something a little bit new and a bit of a segue from what I normally talk about. For those of you that don't know me, I am the founder of Pragmatica Consulting. So we're a specialist consulting firm that specialize in go-to-market, marketing and monetization strategies for businesses. And we particularly operate in the B2B space. I've been operating for about 8 years. And yeah, so there's quite a few lessons and insights that I have adopted and taken note of over the past years throughout my career, which spans probably close to about 17 years. So yeah, this is a lot older than 17 years old. I get this quite often as well in my talks, when I'm meeting people for the first time and they don't know me. I think just akin to good genetics, I suppose. But yeah, I'm going to be talking about diagnosing growth before it becomes expensive. It's quite an interesting sort of topic and probably one that might confuse a lot of people. But essentially what we're trying to relay here is that growth problems in a business and an organization are often misdiagnosed because we're focusing on the symptoms that are happening in our business and are very reactive instead of actually focusing on the business structure. And so I'm going to do something that I've never really done before. For those of you that do know me giving talks and stuff, I generally just stick to the subject matter. I don't really share much about my personal background or sort of career in that. But for the purpose of this talk, I'm actually just going to share a little bit about myself and my journey so that you have some context. And I actually noticed within my own career that every time things got difficult, I found myself defaulting back and going back into what I thought was the safe mode and the safe zone to go into. And so when I started Pragmatica 8 years ago, I didn't start it for the intention of starting a business company, growing it and scaling it. My strategy was just that I was a very ambitious employee within my career, and I felt like I reached a glass ceiling where I just never really got the opportunity to level up into senior management positions. And I'm young, I was in my 20s, I'm a little bit impatient. I'm like, I don't want to be stuck in the same job for 5 years and not be promoted within, time is, a very valuable asset that we have. And so I took the opportunity after about 10 or 12 years, working my way up the career ladder, working for different companies all the time. When I didn't get a promotion, my strategy was to hop to another company and work my way up there. And that strategy actually worked pretty well for me in my career growing up. To which then I started the business to say, well, you know what? I'm going to start my own company so that I can prove and showcase that I am senior management material and that I can do what it takes and run a business. And hey, if it doesn't work out after a year, that's okay then. At least I've got a year's experience that I actually created for myself in order to, get a job and then move my way up the career ladder. So that strategy didn't quite work out for me. But then when I had started the business and things were picking up and I got my first clients and I was on stage and I was doing work, all of this was just really kind of going with the flow. And I think people often ask me, like, what has my entrepreneurship journey been like? And I can say to them, it's like an absolute freaking roller coaster, guys. Especially when you don't have it planned out and you're just kind of winging it. I mean, I started the business not for the purpose of like what most startups do, which is the way you're supposed to do it. So I'm kind of sharing my story on how not to kind of start a business. But yeah, just kind of winging it and essentially building the raft while you're jumping off the cliff. I didn't even have that raft built and then decide to take that leap of faith, dive in, hit the water, hopefully pop up like a buoy, and then scramble. And then every once in a while, when the waves of business come knocking or some other challenge comes and hits you off, you kind of like manage your way to like wiggle off your way to shore and just recoup yourself a little bit and then get yourself back out there. So that's very much like a survival sort of instinct of like entrepreneurship. And I think there's a lot of people, at least I've spoken about within my career and that can kind of relate. Throughout my journey of starting my business, when I got clients and stuff, things didn't work out. And when things got hard, defaulting back to, safe mode of saying, well, then, the pandemic had hit and all the new business development that I was busy working on, all the clients pulled the brakes on any new projects. And then I was sitting there with myself finding like, oh gosh, I've got no business. All my clients, all my work is dried up. There's a pandemic. What do we do now? It's a proper oh shit moment, and a lot of people had that and a lot of fear in that space sort of came about. And I was like, well, that's it. That's the sign that, throwing the towel and have to get a job. And I actually did. I started applying and I got some job offers, and just like, it was literally within 45 minutes before I responded to the email accepting the letter of offer, I got a random phone call to say, hey, Amanda, we heard about you. We heard you're one of like the best digital strategists ever. We have a client in overflow work. Are you available? And I was like, really, universe? Just when I like kind of gave up on that and I kind of resigned myself to that this is the case it's going to be. Now you do this, messing with me in this emotional roller coaster again. And yeah, I ended up landing one of my biggest clients throughout my whole career, where we converted a 3-month project into a 1.5-year project. And then that landed me into getting another client I dubbed like the runway client, where we started building up. But then that new phase of the roller coaster of business again, just on the raft, winging it, trying to figure out how to do it, challenges with staffing issues, challenges with scaling, operations, all that, managing client expectations, managing budget, taxes, VAT, oh my Lord, it's just overwhelming, especially when you just sort of wing it, You don't necessarily have any coaching or guidance, you're just trying to figure this out for yourself. It's quite a daunting experience. And then when that sort of dried up, I was like, oh, okay. Then there was also the loneliness of the entrepreneurial journey when you have your own business. I was approached by another company or a startup to say, based on all the experience and everything that I got, come on board and partner with them. And I thought this is a great opportunity for me, maybe best of both worlds. Because what I didn't bank on, and I'll go to this, is there were 2 key factors, moments of clarity within my career when I started my business. Was number 1, I was not banking on the fact that I'd become psychologically unemployable within the first 2 years. So when it didn't work out and business had dried up and I was taking on job offers, going into it, it just couldn't work. I had like a very frank conversation with an industry peer who also was in the media industry with me and started his own company. And we were like at a coffee shop and he was just saying like, you don't anticipate it, but you're an entrepreneur when you actually just can't go back. And I was like, well, there goes my safety net. There goes my comfort zone. I can't go default back into safe mode. But there's like habits that we have within ourselves where I was like, okay, I can't get a job back in employment or in corporate. It's just going to be utterly soul destroying. So I need to figure out something else. Let me partner with someone else's business. And I got this opportunity to partner with them, but it was conditional on the stance that I have to shelve my company and I have to put all my focus and efforts into their business. And I looked at this and I was researching it really hard. I was consulting with other advisors and mentors and that in the space. And I was like, okay, and these people I knew, I'd worked with them before. They were actually a client of mine before. And then they wanted to start up a new venture. And I was like, well, this is great because how this works for me is that there is a business partnership. So maybe I can go ahead and do that. And that was also a tough lesson to learn because in that moment of clarity, number 1, psychologically unemployable, I cannot go back to that. So I have to make it work. Number 2, never invest in someone else's business at the expense of your own. That was a very hard lesson for me. But again, we are all creatures of habit. When things get tough and, we're in our space of like addressing with the symptoms and being very reactive to the environments that we're in within our business, we make different decisions, but often that we are following the same patterns. And it's not easy. When I realized I wasn't solving the actual problem, I was reacting to the symptoms of my own career and my business. And so I had actually misdiagnosed growth for my own career and with my own business. And so this is what I've noticed throughout the years and the client contracts that I've been working on throughout my career as well, with previous companies that I've worked at and observing and doing all the research that there is to do, is that I see the same pattern inside businesses all the time. Founders are looking to create new products, new innovation. They have to pivot when some of their products are not taking off, or the market isn't responding to it. They're chasing new markets. So when businesses have kind of reached a plateau in their sales and they see their pipelines dried up, they become a little bit complacent. They're like, we've had the same clients for 10 years, 15 years. We don't need to sort of do that. I worked for tech companies where, their way of doing things were doing so well, and then the market changes, and the industry changes, and there's new competitors coming in, and that's disrupting. And they're thinking, no, our business strategy is we're going to hold the fort. We're going to stick through, and we're going to maintain our thing. And if you don't adapt, you die. So CTOs and CIOs are like deploying new technologies. Everyone is pushing, board of directors are pushing for whatever that return of investment is that they're looking for. Marketers are then trying to push for more budget in their campaigns. Everything is different tactics that people are trying to deploy within their particular roles within an organization, but you're all kind of dealing with the same challenge. And so when it comes to marketing a business and taking your products to market, or selling and marketing your services and your solutions and your offerings, what I've come to realize as a marketing consultant that's been in this industry for so many years is most businesses don't necessarily have a marketing problem. It's a clarity problem. So adopting the mentality of having more channels and being present on all the different platforms is not going to fix your issue of your ROI, your sales, or your leads. Throwing more budget at something isn't going to fix the issue either. Throwing and playing around with more AI tools, that's not necessarily the way that's going to fix it. So not one of these things. All of this is very symptom-orientated in a very reactive way that people approach business. And so, the topic of AI disrupting the world and the economies and everything and businesses and how everything is like rapidly evolving. It's not there as part of, it's not there to save, it's not going to save a confused growth strategy in your business. It's only going to accelerate it. So my message to a lot of people is don't look at AI as part of your strategy or as the be-all and end-all of the strategy, but you've got to look at it as an amplifier and as a tool. And I think, if show of hands, how many of you have felt intimidated by AI or find it a little bit overwhelming and confusing? I mean, if any of you don't, well, please do come and speak to me, because then you're probably the godfather of AI in that. But it's perfectly normal for it to be overwhelming because it's operating at such a fast pace and rapid pace that we can barely like blink our eyes, and then the next thing, OpenClaw has now just deployed something new. All the things are there, and it's all very overwhelming. But the CEO of Microsoft actually puts this quite well. He's describing AI as a massive platform shift in our economies and the way that the world operates, on the same historical level of when the PCs came out, or when the internet broke out, or cloud systems. So, if you're feeling overwhelmed by all of it, there's a reason, and everybody feels intimidated by AI. I would challenge the person that wants and says they're not, then again, please, let's have a cup of coffee or a glass of wine for that. But it's no surprise that we all do feel that way. because looking at the sheer magnitude of technologies that are available out in the market, it's just too much to choose from. Everyone is jumping onto that bandwagon and selling things and saying, this is the be-all, this is the tool that you need. My background in the ad tech and martech space was, in the early 2000s, I would consult to clients. I would say to them, all right, if you need to adopt a new marketing technology or advertising technology, before you go ahead and build it, because there was the era of everyone needs to build something, just check and see that what you're thinking about building doesn't already exist. And you could maybe just pay a monthly or annual subscription and have a whole team of deploying it. So I've saved companies millions of dollars by actually just looking at that arm as opposed to building their own technology before realizing that it's actually not compliant or something else is available. And one of the things I've often said to businesses when I'm consulting with them on their strategy on how they're going to grow and explore new revenue models when they're wanting to monetize other aspects of their business is to say, what are you in the business of doing? So if you're in the business of media and tech, then cool. Prioritize all your efforts in media and tech. If you're in the business of finance, then in-house your finance. But for me, I'm not in the business of finance, so I don't try and do all my finances. I outsource it. If it's tech and stuff, I don't try and build my own technology. I'm outsourcing it. So it's always just really helpful just to come back to like basic principles of like where you need to kind of go and how you need to navigate the overwhelming world of all the technology that's available to you out there. And if you're wondering why marketing is still overwhelming and seems to be like this massive elephant in the room that no one ever manages to get out or just handle down, it's because of how it's evolved at such a rapid pace and over generations. Marketing principles that have applied in the beginning, don't necessarily apply as much today anymore, because of how consumer behavior has evolved, how businesses operate, how we take it, and even in terms of cultural shift. So I even asked AI to make this little slide and this infographic, which I think was really perfect, to actually showcase the different generations of how marketing has evolved per generation. So marketing 1.0 was like the baby boomer era, where all it was advertising. You just had a very simple website, not even website, like a flyer and a poster or whatever, and it was very much around the product and just showcasing the product. People bought the product. And then it kind of evolved over to customer-centric, so the Gen X, where everyone needs to have a good customer experience. There's lots of competition out there, so which one is going to give us a better customer experience? Those are the ones that we go into. And then we have like the millennials, where marketing has evolved into a much more values-driven based sort of thing. So it's not just the product and the price and whatever it is that you're offering, but there's a value, there's an identity that people want to associate with your brand and with your business. And a lot of that starts building around the trust, because at that same age, in that era of marketing was where the internet boomed and trust started becoming an issue. And then there's fake news and fraud and all that sort of stuff. So all of these things have like transitioned into how your business is there to market. And I've seen a lot of times the businesses, especially in the B2B space, they're like, well, we don't need to invest in sales and marketing. We can just go and sell and tell people about our product. But if you don't have any credibility about it, if they don't know and understand your business and the values that you're doing, or they're searching for something and you're not visible there, you're dead in the water to your competitors. And so it's now evolved to the point where we're in the space now in the era of AI, where it's autonomous marketing. So a lot of it is now out of our hands as business owners and marketers in terms of how we can communicate to our target market or our ideal customers about, hey, this is my brand, this is my product, this is my company, buy into me and selling. Like, you can try that all you like, but you can't pull the wool over people's eyes anymore. And so that's had a whole new dynamic shift into how marketing businesses and stuff goes about. And so with that being said, when I kind of enter into a company on a new client project, or I'm looking at a business, I'm not looking at like the channel matrix first. I'm not looking at their marketing and their tech stack. I'm looking at like 3 other signals in terms of their growth and their go-to-market efforts. And what I like to call it is kind of like, almost like a bit of a digital health index, if you will. So, and again, tell me if this is worthwhile kind of trademarking or something, because this is kind of where I'm leaning into. And I often kind of say to businesses, I'm like, all right, consider me your doctor or your therapist, right? Here's the couch, sit down, tell me your problems, tell me your woes. Tell me where you're at with your business, where you're struggling, what the pain points are. And, you know, it's a lot easier to diagnose the symptoms that you have within your business, and where the areas are overwhelming. And then it's helpful for us as consultants, because we have experience in working with projects across the spectrums and industries, to be able to find the root causes of that. And so this is one of the frameworks that we apply in our business for clients, is to have a look at these sort of signals. So signal number 1 is like, we want to see what's at the heart of your business. Like, where is the pulse? What is it that's skipping those people's heartbeats? Like, is there alignment within your organization? Because if an organization doesn't have alignment, particularly in terms of its sales and marketing efforts, there's going to be a disconnect. You're going to constantly have a situation where sales and marketing teams are debating different definitions amongst each other, or they're chasing different KPIs. And then when that happens, then that's generally a signal that there's a leakage in the growth potential of a business, and also the revenue that they could be tapping into. And for CMOs of this day and age, the chief marketing officers, my word, we have our work cut out for us in this role, because that job function has evolved drastically into what it was back in the 1960s, let alone the 90s and the early 2000s. It's become a lot more technical. It's become a lot more integrated with revenue, ROI, all those sort of things. An interesting observation I've noticed as well is, like, particularly in the SME sector, any business always prioritizes sales and finance, right? That's a no-brainer. But the marketing aspect is like, oh, we don't know, maybe we don't need it. And then the sales and finance are like, why is sales not working? Oh, operations. Okay, we've got operations. But there's always just this marketing element that just people just don't quite get right. And it's kind of like an alchemy. It's a mix between art and science. You can't necessarily look and apply the same principles of what you would do from operations, sales, finance, as you would in terms of marketing. So there's often a disconnect over there. What I've also seen as well with companies is, you know, maybe a business is outsourcing all of their marketing to a marketing agency. Full service marketing agency. That's great. You tell the agency, we want our social media, our email marketing. You give them a brief, and then they go through building your brand and that. But then when it comes to board level of the C-suite having to report back, and the CMO kind of saying, all right, here's the marketing efforts and budget. The chartered accountants at C-suite level are looking at their spreadsheets, and they're like, well, all this money is going into marketing. Where's the direct return on investment? And I say this every single time, and I'll never ever stop saying it. Marketing is there to support your sales efforts, not to replace it. They need to work hand in hand. And if the sales teams are not informing the marketing departments of what's working and what's not working, you're going to have leakage in your growth systems, and it is going to affect things in the business. And so part of a big role of why I had started this company, and why my company actually survived and thrived throughout its entire roller coaster phases, is because I'm fulfilling a critical role and function within the ecosystem. That it's almost like being that necessary middleman between the client and the marketing service providers. Because from a client to a business owner side, you have enough on your plate when you have to figure out how to run the business, operate it, manage your customers, your staff, operations, your sales, etc. Now to figure out the entire complex ecosystem of how marketing is evolving, it's overwhelming. And then having to be able to brief that to an agency or a service provider that's really just there to say, okay, cool, you want social media? We can do your social media. And we can just spit it out. But if it's not working, there's that disconnect as to why it's not working out. And there's a lot of friction that happens because from a business side, you don't know how to brief the agency properly. And from an agency perspective or service provider, they're just happy to sell you the Rolls Royce of their marketing suite and services. I mean, they'll sell you £1 million brand, stationery kit and everything, and billboard banners and all that kind of stuff, if you're not giving them the right instructions. Prompt engineering, right? We've all had this experience with when you're going on to AI and you're wanting to ask it to do something. It's only going to spit out what you're telling it to do. And if you're not giving it the right instructions or the right context, then you can't be surprised that the results are not coming out the way you want it to. And so the same thing applies in business strategy when you are needing to inform your team about how to take your product to market, how to sell it and promote it, and what channels and mediums to use and how much budget to allocate and all of that. So all of that comes in to it. And there's a lot of pressure in terms of translating all of those metrics and those activities from a marketing space into such a manner in where there is a commercial outcome, because it's a very fine line. A commercial outcome is very simple when it comes to a direct sales or something in e-commerce. But when it's like a unique solution that you're selling, that consists of services, products, and platforms and that, and commitments, and it gets a lot more integrated and complex. So sales and marketing departments, when they often operate in silos and they're reporting separately, it creates a disconnect. Signal number 2, your ICP clarity scan. So I look for, when I ask clients, there was a client contract I had a few years ago. This was an IT solutions company that had a government contract that they were really sort of cushy on for about 2-3 years. And then, actually, I've had quite a few clients in this space, because there was another SaaS company that also had a client contract that was 4 or 5 years, and it was kind of like their, what we call your runway client. You do something really well for that client, as their business grows, they give you money, and your business grows forward. But what happens is that business is now basically growing in conjunction because the demand is coming from their number one client. And it's a very tricky, risky place to be in. It's putting all your eggs in one basket. And you realize that you're putting all your efforts and services on a handful of clients, 1 or 2 key clients. And you're building a team to service those 1 or 2 key clients. Now you've done such a fantastic job. Your client doesn't need you anymore for your services. They're done. And then you think, oh shit, that's dried up. We don't have a pipeline of new sales and new business that's coming along. Now what happens? And so I've often seemed to attract businesses where they kind of wake up a little bit too late, or just on the limit of like, we need to invest in sales and marketing. And they've never invested in it before because there's this level of complacency around it. And then you wake up a little bit late. And now we need to work on a strategy, which is okay. We do that. We pull rabbits out of hats. But coming back to the ICT company, they didn't know how to communicate who they were and what they did, let alone who their ideal customer was. They had this really cool piece of technology where they could bring it out into multiple industry sectors. So we managed to hone them down on like 4 industry sectors. And I said, like, who is your ideal customer? They're like, oh, it can be anyone. We're like Google. We'll be everything to everybody. Being everything to everyone is nothing to nobody, guys. So you really need to hone it down. And I see the same in terms of a service like agency space, where agencies are like, we're full service digital agency. We provide all the tech stack. I'm like, well, what is it that sets you apart from the others? And this is also a particularly challenging thing for me in my business as well, because being in management consultancy, you have to be broad spectrum everywhere. But one of the things, again, a moment of clarity for me in my business to navigate that space is to help facilitate niche at scale. So a big part of like how we operate is working and partnering with other industry experts in what they do. So when there's a client project that comes on board and there's a need, we bring on the right partners. So we consult, we put the strategy, but when facilitation of that strategy comes into place, we bring in the right partners. We don't try and be everything to our client. There's plenty of money out there. There's plenty of business opportunities. You don't need to play the monopoly game. And that's an interesting way that I think corporates and C-suite level executives still struggle to this day when they see that. So making sure that you're clear on who your ideal customer and client is, because if you're not clear on that, you have very weak messaging. Your sales people are chasing the wrong customers, and all of that is just wasted opportunity and wasted spend, and just, yeah, pissing in the wind, really. Signal number 3, and the final one, is your growth signal check. So I attract a lot of businesses where it's like, ooh, monetization strategies. How can we make more revenue? How can we make more money? Okay, that's generally like the good one to go for. And it's jumping the gun sometimes. Before you can go and chase a new revenue stream or scale your business, do you have the right structures in place before you scale? Because the next thing, sometimes one of the best problems to have is you have such an influx of new business coming in, but you don't have the structure or the infrastructure to be able to maintain and secure that. And that can also be very damaging for your business and your brand in the long term. So another company that, actually the one that asked me to sort of shelve my business and to focus on taking their product and their business to market, was a case of chicken and egg scenario. So brought me on board to take to market what essentially didn't exist yet. It was kind of like, if we bring the demand for sales and then we work on securing the supply, we can bring the two together and then we can kind of bootstrap this, and then they sort of pay for each other further. It's very much like a smoke and mirrors game in business. It's highly risky, and it's not necessarily a principle or a strategy that I would recommend businesses do, but I've seen a lot of companies do that as well in the past. So generally, your go-to-market, do not go into a go-to-market before you have an MVP in your business and your offering, because that's not necessarily growth. That's pretty much growth theater. So when activity feels more like progress, but activity without alignment is just pretty much expensive movement for you. And so coming to a close, I thought we could do a little exercise or a table for when you are there within your business, is to figure out, are you scaling with clarity, or is it just through activity? Because of all the, the hamster wheel scenario of people, just trying to keep up abreast of what's going on and trying to think that they have to deploy an AI tool or an AI solution or strategy within their business. Not to say that you don't, but there are some fundamental questions and signals that you need to check on first before you go. Otherwise, you might be going down the wrong path. So if you were to think about it, your sales and marketing, if it's working together in silos, you rate on a scale of 1 to 5, more or less where you're at. Are you clear, and is everyone in your company and your business clear about who the ideal customers or audience or target market is? And sometimes what's also very useful is which ones are not your least ideal customers, because it's also very damaging for your business if you bring on a client and they're not the best client to have. It becomes a very energy draining scenario for the team and the staff, and then that's also a place where you might lose talent. Speaking towards Nikki's talk earlier this morning of like retaining talent and the new way of hiring and recruiting and how businesses are operating these days. So all of these things have knock-on effects if you're not very clear and crystal clear about them from the get-go. And then, reacting to various campaign signals and diagnosing what's driving behind them. So when it comes to marketing campaigns, I see this all the time. There's a lot of vanity metrics at play. You run a campaign, you put something on Google or Meta, and lots of impressions, lots of clicks, lots of reach, but hey, where's the bottom line? Does it actually result in a sale coming forward? So making sure that your strategy and the goals that you're setting with the business are aligned with the marketing goals and objectives, and are then matched and aligned with the campaign marketing goals and objectives, is always very critical. So if you kind of scored anywhere below 4 on any of these, you're kind of looking at, you know, there's opportunities that you're missing out on, and there's a bit of a leakage there. And so once you've kind of done that self-check and assessment of whether you think that there is definitely more that can be done in business, the real question becomes not necessarily what to do more of. It's more of a question of whether you're actually building and scaling in the right order. And that's kind of where the horse and cart scenario comes in. Because a lot of the time people are a little bit too eager and excited. Oh, techies, we love building tech and products and stuff. Let's build this and take it to market. But have you actually checked if there is market need for it? Have you actually checked if that technology doesn't already exist before you go? Have you actually checked that it's viable of part of your business and you have the resources to scale it? There's lots of sort of things in that space. So making sure whether you're building in the right order is actually really critical. Because a lot of business are not failing because they lack the effort. They're just putting the cart before the horse. And so that's where it keeps them stuck in a constant cycle of starting, but also just never really scaling. And so you can't scale what hasn't been properly designed in that aspect. And again, just coming to my sort of personal story, is I couldn't have scaled my business if I kept thinking in the mindset of like, well, if it doesn't work out, I'll just go back into, you know, employment. Or if it doesn't work out, I'll just go back and invest in someone else's business and all the resources there until something happens. The winging it strategy is not a very good strategy. So doing it with intention and using those 3 signals or diagnostic health check is quite useful. So that's pretty much what I help businesses with at the end of the day, is helping to align your go-to-market, your growth strategies, your marketing, and your monetization all in one. And then in terms of what Pragmatica is, its consulting does, our target market, our ideal customers are basically businesses that are looking to scale, have something new that they want to bring out to market, and companies that don't necessarily have an internal marketing department, but they know that that is something that's invested in a bit overwhelming. So if you're the sales and marketing manager of your business and that's about it, come speak to us, we can help you with that. We basically operate as an outsourced CMO arm. And there's a difference between fractional CMO functions and outsourced CMO functions. An outsourced CMO function, you basically get the whole department. We run and set up your marketing infrastructure in your business for you. Whereas fractional is just you getting a part-time freelance independent CMO for the business for a temporary space of time. And then being part of, I've always been super passionate about startups and tech businesses and SMEs and small businesses. But at the end of the day, you know, I can't keep the lights switched on when it comes to servicing them, and they can't afford me based on the the rates and that kind of thing. And so there's always been like this catch-22 situation of like, oh, okay, we'll have to focus on the corporate client contracts because that's where the money's at. But there's a real need for the individuals and the SMEs for the services that we offer. And that's kind of where the digital doctor aspect comes in. So what we've managed to do now is to be able to make my services available in like a coaching, advisory, mentorship, just like mini workshop sort of thing at a much more discounted rate than what it would be in the B2B space. So if any of you are in that space or realm and would like to know more or tell me, want to sit on my couch and tell me your woes and your problems, preach, come and contact me and pop me an email. And if you put in the email Big5DigitalSummit, that we can definitely make sure we organize a severely discounted rate for the first consultations, just to sort of get things going. So that's where I'm at. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Amanda. So your strategy is essentially, if you're going to start a business, burn the boats.
Burn the boats.
That's it. When the Vikings would invade a place, they would burn the boats so that they couldn't escape, they couldn't retreat.
No, I would not say that. I mean, I think it's always important to have a backup plan. Mm-hmm. So no, that was just my personal story.
You like, burned the boats. Not really, but I'm just saying.
I didn't even have a boat. I was on a raft. I was just like winging it kind of thing.
Okay.
I think there's a dynamic of like some people's entrepreneurial journeys are like, you go ahead and you enter something. If it doesn't work out, you can fall back to your
I guess my
default and
point
have a
was,
safety
is the
net.
backup plan sometimes something that keeps you from fully embracing the opportunity?
Sometimes,
Yeah.
yeah. It depends, I think if you're looking at a business and you're wanting to embark on something new in the business, a big part of strategy is having a plan B, in anything when it comes to game theory and stuff. If it doesn't work out the way you anticipate it to, and it rarely does because we can't predict the future, you got to have a backup plan, an option A, B, or C if it doesn't go that way.
Maybe not all the way to D. Oh, all right.
For sure, yeah.
You want to move on to your next?
Yes, we have our next speaker to come and join me on the stage. I think I can just keep the microphone on, right? Okay, cool. I don't know if we want to end the slideshow and then through. Cool. Can you give us 2 minutes just to regroup for a sec?
Sure.
I'm sure everyone probably wants a loo break as well.
I will just make a few comments about what's coming up next. We're going to have a Q&A with Ross here once we get set up here. And then we're going to have a quick lunch, and then we're going to carry right on with the afternoon program beginning at 1400 to 2 o'clock with Rahul Jain from Peach Payments, which we're really looking forward to. And we're going to have a very packed afternoon, great content, so stick around. We'll just have a sort of we'll all stay in this room through lunch and into the afternoon. So, Amanda, are we ready? Almost. You want to just get started, chat a little bit until the slides come up?
Is my mic back on? Yeah? Okay, cool. All right, so we're doing this back to back very quickly. Sorry,
Amanda,
guys.
is there supposed to be something?
No. No, we're just doing our usual fireside chat. So a lot of what I was kind of sharing in my talk, there's often a struggle between a language barrier or communication between how marketers can translate the efficacy of their marketing at a C-suite level. And so the topic of today's fireside chat is the marketing diagnosis, and are you investing in growth, or is it just a reporting activity that you find? So one of the experiences that I think we've witnessed and a lot of people can probably relate to, especially from a marketing standpoint, is like it's all just report and lots of numbers and stuff, but what does it actually mean? There are so many different metrics and just a lot of BS out there in the world where people pull the wool over your eyes. And the amount of times I've been in meetings where people go out and then to my side next to me, they say, wow, those people really look like they know what they're talking about, but I haven't got a freaking clue what they were saying. Like they sound really smart, so we must be going with them. That's generally not a good business strategy or a way to approach, certain marketing services and stuff. So now with the age of AI, we can look at how where AI can finally translate the efficacy of your brand into measurable commercial value. And so with that, we've been tackling the long-running debate between marketing and finance. And are companies truly investing in growth, or are they simply just reporting on the activities? And so I have with me here Ross Monroe, who's the founder of Inversion Agency, who has not even yet launched this new technology, this AI platform called Equity and Brand Equity. But Ross, perhaps just do an intro for yourself just so that the audience knows a little bit about you and your background and your journey of how you came across to where we are today.
Cool, thanks for having me. So I've been in marketing for over 10 years. I think long suffering, dealing with everything from kind of like baby, startups, and then working our way all the way up to working with global, corporates. But yeah, it's been a hell of a journey, and it's a difficult space. That's, I think, the best way I can describe it.
Yeah. Anyone here in the room that's been in marketing and How many people of you are in the marketing space or industry? No one. How many
Nice.
of you have, okay,
Smart.
2 or 3, yeah. Your dealings with marketing agencies or marketing service providers, if you have conversations in terms of like your business and where you're at with your business and the marketing, like how are those conversations? Are they genuinely quite strained, or is it something that's like actually easy for you to understand and navigate with them? Show of hands. Yes, no? Very difficult. Yeah. 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 Yes. No love language for marketing. Yeah. Yeah. Money matters. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's always very disconnected, right? Yeah. Especially when things operate in silos. You've got someone. Gotcha. Yeah.
So if I can jump on that, so I think the biggest problem that I've come across, and this is part of the why we sat up here today, was very few marketers actually trained in marketing, and most owners or kind of founders don't actually understand what marketing is. And if you actually understand the fundamentals of it, it goes back down to the 4 Ps, which is marketing influences all aspects of the business, from the product, the price, the promotion, and then distribution. But the vast majority of people are only obsessed with the promotional aspect of marketing, and with that, even the branch of just advertising, right? So what often happens is that they have this kind of approach to marketing, which is completely flawed, but inherently is what we face, which is why I'm long suffering, and I enjoy kind of bringing this to the awareness of founders and CAs and CFOs, etc. Is marketing is primarily about serving the customer base, and the when you look at growth, for example, the biggest driver of growth is actually not what you put in; it's actually the category. So the category growth is actually the biggest driver of growth, not anything that you're doing, but yet very few people are actually tracking the category at all, if ever, right? Especially when it comes to the scale-up space or the SME space. They kind of, here's our product, and often they're founder-led, which will be, I'm passionate about this product, this is the best thing ever, and I've made this, now here, marketing and sales, go and find a customer base, and that's completely flawed, it's completely backwards. So what often happens then is that there's this flurry of activity. They'll hire an agency, they'll hire, you'll do all this media spend and that kind of stuff. And what will often happen is you've got all this activity, but no impact on the business, primarily because marketing wasn't involved in the first fundamental stages of, firstly, is the category even growing? Because that's the first step you should be looking at, is the category growing? If it's not growing, then, you're already up against it. And then, are you involved in the product? Do you even understand the customer base? Do they even want what you're making? And then the pricing side of it, often it's kind of like, here's our base cost, and then we're going to put a markup on it. It's completely flawed. First it's like, what would the customer base actually be willing to spend? How do they see that? And where they're looking at competitors, and the competitors are doing the same thing, you're up against it. Because now you're basically doing an internal pushing out and hope that the market will attest that. So when you try to measure like marketing impact, if it's only on the advertising side of things, it's always never going to link back down to the business side. So I think that's the primary start is the 4 Ps, getting that right and getting that actually influenced. Secondly, then also on the measurement side, we spoke about this last time, was the first kind of way they're thinking of it is everyone is in market and everyone's going to buy my product tomorrow. Like every customer is in market, but especially in the B2B space, you've got long consideration sets. You've got a long buying journey, and if there's a nice rule which we use in marketing science, which is the 95-5 rule, and that's a really good starting point as well, because the 95-5 rule really works out how many customers are actually in market or not. And 95 of your customer base aren't buying right now; they're not in market, and then the 5% are buying in market, and of that, those 5%, they've already had about 80 to 90% of those buying committees that are out there buying a product or service have already got a list of 3 to 5 companies that they've already decided to use, that they're researching. So of the 5% are in market, the vast majority of people aren't in market, so they've already been chosen. And if you're not on that day one consideration set, all that activity and advertising that you're doing is not getting onto that day one consideration set, you're not going to make any impact, you know. And the other scary stat is that 40% of all in-market buyers in the B2B space actually end up in no decision. So they actually don't make a decision. So you're actually only dealing with 60% of that. And if you're not on the day one consideration set, you're ending up on like less than about 5% if you're the only person that's being considered. But if you've got 3 or 4 other people that are in that kind of consideration that's not been part of the day one consideration set, you've got around 2% and, you know, can all the way down to 0.2% chance of buying. So activity and impact, they misalign because there's a fundamental flaw of how we actually understand how marketing works, how buying cycles work, how brand and you know, the in-market buyers and the out-of-market buyers, how do you get onto those day one consideration sets? Those are all flawed from the beginning, so the measurement is always going to be flawed at the end.
So basically, it's a flawed business model in terms of how marketing is showcasing their value at C-suite or even at board level.
Yeah, it's just misunderstood from day one of what it is. You know, and I think that's if you can solve that in the first place, then everything else starts becoming a lot easier, and that's essentially what I spend most of my time with, is explaining to execs and founders and CFOs and CAs of how marketing actually works, how people actually make buying decisions in the various spaces, and work out the maths behind that, and then you start working out how you actually need to invest in marketing and the time frames and actual KPIs that you need to be measuring.
We have a question over there in front. Yes?
Sorry.
Sorry. Welcome to our AA club. Yeah. Sure.
Apologize to everyone for the sound of my voice. Generally, long sales cycles, big ticket items. What sort of metrics do you guys look at in order to prove to C-suite, board, etc., that marketing efforts are actually working? So I know they're working because the pipelines are full. The people in the pipelines are within our ICP, for example. But there always seems to be this lack of belief that it's actually working because it hasn't turned into a sale. And as marketers, you know, it's always sales' fault if it doesn't work. What sort of metrics do you think do that job?
Yeah, the problem is if the business is built on like sale conversion, you know, your job is not conversion, obviously. And
it's the linkage between the two, right?
Yeah,
so I think
there's a couple of proxies. So for example, if if the category is growing, firstly, and your brand strength is one of them, is a really good one, right? Because brand strength is an indication of mental availability. So how you get onto the day one consideration set is mental availability. Your brain is your best search engine in the world, right? Buying doesn't happen by accident. People aren't rational. People, you know, you've got buying committees of like 5, 6, 7 people. Each one of those people come onto the buying committee with predetermined favorite brands or, you know, businesses that they want to identify in the buying journey, right? So something like 80, 90% of the buying journey has already been done before they speak to sales, before they actually reach out to the business. Most of the time, they're doing the research to validate their preconceived notions and, you know, prove that this is the right company that they want to work with, right? So most of that's already been done. So a great kind of proxy is like brand strength and primarily through what I really love is share of search. So in B2B, for example, share of search is like, oh, like not many people are searching for us. But the thing is, they're high ticket items. You know, if share of search and you're doing it across all your competitor sets, and you're tracking all your competitors, and you know you've got a declining share of search, for example, then marketing isn't working. You know, something's wrong. And I say marketing is the 4 Ps, not just the advertising side of it. Are you making a dent in creating more people aware of the business, and you're ending up on more day one consideration sets, right? Then once you've got that kind of going, that's on the uptrend, considering the category is growing, then you also want to look at things like your in the CRM, your speed to close. You know, so how often is that happening? How much do sales have to give discounts? Because good marketing, good branding, you don't have to give discounts. You know, you don't have to make any concessions because you are the best option, right? And then there's obviously the close rates. You know, sales doesn't have to work as hard, and the close rates are there. Although it's not your responsibility, stronger brands do influence the full pipeline, right? But a proxy is share of search at the upper end of kind of that, you know, that mental availability. And salience isn't brand awareness. It's making more people consider the brand. And that's why I think Share Search is such a game changer. That's why I've built the whole platform around that, because it's a great starting point to explain how it can influence all the unit economics further down, if that helps.
Yeah. And I think like just in terms of like the more in the nutshell version of your question, I think I can relate to this because as marketers, when you have to report back at like C-suite level on the efficacy of marketing, I think it's very critical and important. Everything's always about managing expectations. And there's an inflection point. I get the giggles, see the giggles in the audience every time I say this. There's an inflection point when it comes from marketing, and marketing transitions over into the sales. And so a lot of the part is like marketing and agencies and that, the closest they get in terms of, particularly in the B2B space, is lead generation, right? We can do everything to help support your sales efforts. And we say, here you go, here's a whole influx of marketing qualified leads and sales qualified leads. Well, now sales team, over to you guys to convert that. That's not necessarily our job anymore, but give us that insight and that feedback as to why it's not converting into that sale or into that customer. And again, it comes to the point of making sure that the two are working really closely together, and it's not the one to replace the other. But I think, in terms of preaching all of this and trying our best to manage these expectations and bridge the gap between finance and sales and marketing efforts and that sort of stuff, especially at like board level or C-suite level. Why is it that you think that the C-suite level really struggle to convey or be able to report back in terms of the efficacy of marketing? Or why is it that you think, and do you even think, because this is my question, I really think that in the B2B space of things, a lot of businesses think that they don't need to invest in marketing. It's an afterthought. But in the B2C space, you see brands, FMCGs and stuff are always investing heavily. Why is it so different in the B2B space?
Yeah, it's because they don't understand marketing 101. So
why would B2B businesses not understand marketing 101, but everyone in the B2C space totally get it?
B2C has to spend because the buying cycle's a lot shorter, and there's kind of more customer base. So you're dealing with hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands versus potentially 100. Current businesses that you can sell to if it's a high ticket item in South Africa every quarter, for example. So it makes sense to then go advertise to get in front of them. But the problem is marketing is seen again as only a promotional activity, and the budget, to be in front of the customers that are actively searching makes sense because there's a whole bunch of them and they can see the movements quite quickly in the B2C space. Where in the B2B space, it's slower, it's longer. A buying cycle takes years sometimes, and often, what also the execs forget is that if a company is the ideal target company, they could be under contract for the next 2 years, and they're not in market, and so how many of those companies are locked in, but they do start the buying cycle potentially a year before, and the problem is when execs think that marketing works immediately and they don't understand the day one consideration set, they don't understand the buying committees and the length of decision making and the amount of work it goes into becoming a lead, they measure it in the short term. And as soon as they measure it in the short term, it won't work. So, again, it goes down to buying cycles. So in the B2C space, you'll see movement quite quickly. You launch an ad, there'll be, maybe 100,000 people in the market, and, you've got 10% share of the market and you'll get X. Whereas in the B2B space, there's not as many people, so they don't see that movement. So then it's kind of like, well, why are we doing this? But that's where it always goes back down to brand, but brand building, especially in the B2B space, should always be the goal. Because, you get onto that day one consideration set, and you're more likely to get chosen, and over time you start seeing but it's measured in years, and that's the problem. It's not measured in months or weeks, and that's where marketing really struggles. But marketing is a 4P exercise, and it should always be how do we make the product, does the market actually want the product? Are we actually distributing it correctly? Are we showing up in places and spaces where people need us to be? And is the pricing at a point that makes them want to work with us? That's what makes it far more sticky than just advertising. And I think that needs to be considered as well.
You used a really great analogy when we were busy prepping for this last week with regards to, salespeople in your team are probably the best advocates for marketing, Because if you think about it, you got to go to door sales, and a salesman has to go and do cold calling or whatever and say, hey, this is my new product or my service offering. The person's going to be like, I don't know you, slam the door in the face. But salespeople would be like the really great ones to say, if marketing is done right and say, hi, I'm a salesperson from X company, you know, the potential customer will be like, oh, I've actually heard of that before. That rings a bell. No pun intended. Okay, let's chat a little bit more. It makes the job for the sales teams a lot better if there's marketing behind it. Leading to my next question is, you know, why do you think it is, or what is your take and your views and opinions or advice? I was like, whichever one, spit out of it either. But what I've noticed is, you know, when economy's bad, when business is not going well, what's the first budget that companies cut? What's the first budget that goes? Where it's like, it's marketing budget, right? It's not less on the sales efforts. It's not less on operational costs. The marketing budget is generally the first thing to go when economies are declining or businesses are not doing well. What is your take on that? And yeah, what sort of message do you have for any businesses or individuals where, you know, if your business is taking strain and you're thinking, oh, you know, either you double down or you cut the marketing budget?
It's probably taking a strain because the CFO cut the budget of brand. So sorry if that's you. But you know, the reality is the brand is generally struggling because it's not invested in the right strategic foundational endeavors early enough. And you know, the B2B space, it'll take years to start showing and it's not like brand building doesn't happen over, like it does make an impact very short term, but the cumulative effects on the unit economics show up in quarters and years. And any business that I've come across that has struggled is primarily because they've overinvested in the short term. Their whole business is predicated on the short term and misunderstanding the value of brand. And you know, as I said, human beings they don't buy rationally. Like, you know, when you throw it back to the founders and the CFOs, it's like, you know, how do you make a decision on buying a car? Or how do you make a decision on, you know, buying clothing items? And it's quite clear that they've often chosen the brand that they've either identified when they saw as a child, or they you know, want to look a certain way or aspiring or whatever the case is.
Or that they trust.
Or that they trust. And you know, that's what brand building is that it's a formulation of a memory that says this brand solves this problem for me when I need it. And if you can create those mental, you know, what we call brand recall at purchase moments. So if you can make that leap that they firstly remember you, because remember, customers don't give a flying shit about you. They've got everything else under the sun to worry about. Your brand just needs to be creative and well-designed from a 4P perspective that creates that recall, that drives them to trust you, that when they come in market, they have that recall, they go, I remember that brand solves that problem when I enter that category entry point, and therefore I'm more likely to choose them. So when a brand is struggling, they've underinvested in those foundational stuff. They've overinvested in the short term. They think that marketing is measured in cycles of, you know, weeks. They think of it as a sales activation activity. And whether the, you know, categories are dynamic, markets are dynamic, you can't control that, which is why it's the number one driver of growth and decline. You need to understand that to continuously kind of grow, you need to be monitoring the market, you need to be investing in the brand strategic elements that do make a difference in the minds of the ideal consumers over time, that compounds in better unit economics over time. So, you know, whether a category is up or down, that's always, you know, but, you know, to ride those waves, investing in product, you know, and changing it up or creating a new innovation or something like that opens up new channels of growth. So it can't always just be, here's a product, must force it down the customer's throat. The customer doesn't always exist to just buy your product.
That's
not
the
how it
sales and
works.
advertising arm, I suppose, where that kind of pushes and nudges to sort of get it across the line. We have run out of time, and we don't want to be the ones between you and your lunch break at this point in time. But if you do have any other questions, we are available, and you can come and speak to us. We'd love to chat a little bit more. I think in closing, I just want to kind of mention, like, you know, just for those that, you know, when you do feel a little bit overwhelmed about the whole sales and marketing business dynamics and difference between brand, marketing, advertising, it's like advertising is where you as a company are in control of the message that you put out to your audience and your market. Marketing is pretty much like the content and the results of that being successful, and marketing is kind of like the organic area where there's a little limited control over how people receive your marketing message. And brand is basically what people are talking about your back, behind your back. That's kind of where it's probably the area that you have least control in terms of communicating your business to your markets. And I think that's where Ross comes in at like how important it is for brand and investing in your brand, because you can't put the words in other people's mouths anymore in those days, based in the marketing 1.2 baby boomer era and economies and stuff where propaganda was rife. And, you know, we all believed everything that we saw online or saw on the news. The market and the world has changed completely differently. So just remember, from an advertising perspective, you have control over what you say and who you say it to and how that message is conveyed. But marketing, you're not in as much control in terms of what people are talking about and how it is being perceived. That's why you get positive brand sentiment and negative brand sentiment based on marketing campaigns. Some influencer goes and talks and brags about your business and does something, but then, you know, next thing they're doing something super dodgy and your brand's associated and now everyone's talking about that. That's out of your control. So again, brand is what other people are talking about it. Marketing is the effects of your advertising and your brand and your efforts, and limited control in that. And advertising is probably the small portion of the pie where you can really sort of push it through. But make sure that there is all of those go hand in hand to support. So thank you all for your time. And
Thank you very much.
Charles. Yes.
Amanda, Ross, thank you so much for that.
Great.
What we're going to do is we're going to just enjoy lunch in here in the room. We're going to start on time and get back on track. At the top of the hour, we're going to have Rahul Jain from Peach Payments with a fireside chat, which I'm very much looking forward to. And please just enjoy a little lunch and we'll get started shortly.